I'm Felicia, and they are my group mates Ashley and Rachel. So our topic today is mental health stigma in Singapore. I'd like to begin our presentation with this question. Who do you think has a mental disorder between these two people you see here? Now, who thinks it's her? Can you, Rachel, raise your hands? Now, who thinks it's her? Okay. Now, I'd like to ask all of you to reflect on your answers. Why do you think it was her, or whoever that answered her as well? And meanwhile, let me share with you my experience. When I was in Polytechnic, I met a friend. She's bright, she's hardworking, and she has good grades. In fact, she never scored lower than a GPA of 3.8 over 4, and that's not easy, I can assure you. And here's the shocker. Behind these grades, to get these very results, she actually self-harmed, and she had severe anxiety issues, which no one knew because everyone only saw the surface, which are her results. And she didn't let anyone else know. And here is my point. While it is true that there are certainly individuals who are more obviously struggling with coping with their mental health issue, that we shouldn't forget that there are still individuals who are not as obvious. Anyone, and I mean anyone, can have a mental health issue. It's just that it may not be as obvious, and even mental health professionals themselves get it. And now I'd like to bring our attention back to what I asked all of you to reflect on. Why did you think it was her? Who thinks it was because, she's so obviously suffering from something because she's so skinny? Did I mislead you? Probably not. Or maybe. But here's my point. Have you ever wondered if maybe the stigma surrounding mental health and its illnesses have colored our perception towards these people? This stigma is very real and very present in Singapore.
Felicia? Are you okay?
Oh, come on, not this thing again. How many times have we practiced yesterday? And like, I'm done with hearing about your excuses about how you can't do a presentation. It's part of our module. You want us all to fail? No, I'm done.
Okay, I'm pretty sure you guys know it was an act. That's a very thank you. That's a very exaggerated example of how one who's under the influence of the stigma could react to someone else with actually a mental health issue. And here are more examples. We may view such people as being weak instead of being sick. So they could just get better anytime they wanted to. They just have to try harder. Or have you ever heard people saying that they are unpredictable, they are dangerous, or they're just irresponsible? They can't do anything. So we shouldn't associate ourselves with them. Did that sound familiar to you in any way? And this stigma is very relevant for us in Singapore, for all of us here, because it can happen to anyone, like I mentioned earlier. And here are the top 5 mental disorders in Singapore: major depressive disorder, alcohol abuse, obsessive compulsion disorder, dementia among the older adults, and schizophrenia. Can you imagine if a kid hears voices but is afraid to tell anyone about it, including his parents, because he is taught that he'll be called crazy? Or maybe one of us here secretly has depression, but is afraid to voice out his worries because he's afraid of being called weak. So I feel that it's really sad if such individuals aren't able to reach their full potential just because they are worried about their image. As such, I believe that we should fight this stigma to help them. And Rachel will share with you more details about this stigma in Singapore.
Thank you, Felicia. So, as you have heard from Felicia, who has just shared with you more about mental stigma, I will take all of you one step deeper and share with you about why all of you here should be concerned about this issue. The mental health stigma can affect our different life domains, including the social aspect, emotional well-being, as well as our careers. So firstly, according to a World Health Organization study, it has been found that almost 800,000 people commit suicide every year, and out of which 20 to 60% suffers from a mood disorder. So, as you can see, mental disorders as well as the harmful use of alcohol are the top contributors to suicide globally. It is important to note that if we are able to identify these persons earlier and allow them to receive the care they need, it would help to reduce suicidal rates dramatically. Now, in order to make it more relevant to all of us here, it has been found that suicidal thoughts and attempts are higher among adults aged 18 to 25. And there's also an estimated of 1,000 suicides in campuses every year. This is because students may feel pressured to keep up a facade of being perfectly fine due to the stigma present. In fact, in general, most people do not seek treatment because they are due to the stigma present. Now, take a look at this response here. These are some examples of stigma faced by those who are mentally ill. Now, take a moment to put yourself in their shoes. How would you feel if you were on the receiving end? Relationships can be strained when people do not know how to approach and interact with those who are mentally ill. Now, moving on to the next domain. Mentally ill people usually suffers from diminished self-esteem as well as self-efficacy. Self-esteem refers to one's perception of their own self-worth, while self-efficacy refers to one's beliefs in their capabilities to complete a given task. Also, as for career-wise, it's not uncommon to hear of employers who shun hiring those who are mentally ill just because they perceive them to be lacking in their capabilities to complete certain job requirements. Thus, you can see that mentally ill people tend to be robbed of work, independent living, as well as other life opportunities. I will pass this time to Ashley.
Okay, thanks Rachel. Okay, so now that Rachel has shared with you about the horrible effects that the stigma can have on the lives of people who are mentally ill, I'd like to share, we can now begin to unravel the causes behind this stigma so that we can find a solution. In the words of Sun Tzu, he writes in his book, The Art of War, if you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. The same applies here. Once we are able to determine what exactly are the causes of stigma, we can then find a suitable solution. The stigma is actually very deeply entrenched in our society, and there are many different causes, but today I will be focusing on 3. Firstly, misconceptions. Secondly, media. And thirdly, culture. Okay, so first up, misconceptions. Unfortunately, people don't always know the truth about mental illnesses, and without the right information, this could mean that they come to the conclusion that these mental illnesses are due to the person being having a flawed character, and maybe they are just incompetent. But as we have explained, this is not the case. Actually, if you think about it for a second, where do we get these ideas about people with mental illnesses? I'll give you a clue. What is this PowerPoint considered? No? No ideas? Okay, never mind. I was actually getting at media. Yes, media exacerbates the problem of mental illnesses, of people not knowing the truth about mental illnesses. And I'm not just talking about your social media sites such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, you name it. Unfortunately, even newspaper articles can be guilty of contributing to the stigma. I myself have read some articles that just don't do justice to the person who is mentally ill, and yeah, it just really contributes very badly to the stigma. Another thing that I would like to raise is actually our culture. How many of you here know what kiasu and kiasi means? Yes? Okay, so the English translation kiasu and kiasi literally means afraid to lose and afraid to die. In other words, ingrained in our very social fabric is the tendency to stay away from things that are weird or scary because I don't want to get into trouble. I have my grades, I have my reputation, basically my whole life at stake. However, that should not be the case. So here is our solution. It's very simple, just 3 steps. Stop, reflect, and reassess. Stop. Give yourself space to think. Take a step back from the situation. And then secondly, reflect. Am I feeling afraid? Or why am I feeling afraid? Thirdly, reassess. Do I really need to be afraid? Or is my reaction a product of the social constructs that we have been living under our entire lives? Now, I know that this solution seems very simple and, you might be thinking, what can a single person like myself do? Singapore is not that big, but we still have a lot of people. But I'd like to offer you this. Think about people like Thomas Edison, Steve Jobs, and Mark Zuckerberg. Yes, they're all rich and famous now, but once upon a time, they were ordinary people just like you and me. The difference between them and us, I feel, is that they had something very simple and very motivational. They had hope that one day their actions would impact the world and change it for the better. Likewise, we should never lose the hope that through our actions we will be able to abolish the stigma and make our society a more friendly and a more inclusive one. So with that, I leave you with this quote, and I thank you for your attention. Feel free to ask any questions.
Can I ask about your call to action?
Yeah,
The
sure.
3 steps is stop, reflect, and reassess.
Yes.
What do you mean by reassess?
Okay, by reassess, I mean that you need to, what the word implies, reassess, meaning you look at the situation and ask yourself, do I really have something to be afraid of? Let's say, thinking back to the situation between me and Felicia just now, what was your reaction to that? Probably... Oh, you thought it was true. Okay, but yeah, how were you feeling? How were you feeling?
Shocked. A bit, yeah.
A bit shocked, right? Your tendency. Maybe you thought like, oh, shucks,
Yeah, then
what's
how about
going on?
you try and imagine if it happened to you, like, oh, we all practice so many times, should be fine, and then suddenly she collapsed, or whoever, one group may collapse like that. What do you think? What's the first thought that comes to mind? Shit. The presentation is screwed because of that person. Maybe?
But to reassess means to just see if that is a fair evaluation. Maybe that person just really has a mental illness and it's not something that is by choice. A lot of people with mental illnesses don't want to be ill, right? It's because maybe biological, psychological and environmental causes that made them this way. So yeah, that's what the reassess step meant. Hope that answered your question.
Also, we are not actually saying, it's not that there's never any danger, because there are, for example, autism, when there's meltdowns, they can get violent. But that doesn't mean you avoid them totally. You just need to learn how to cope with it. Like how parents learn to cope with it, the meltdowns. Do they like, okay, I'm not going to have this kid? No. They don't do that. They learn. They reassess how should they deal with this situation when he has a meltdown. Yeah, so that's really the basis of what we are trying to say.
Any other questions? Thank you for that, by the way. Okay, thank you for your attention.